Welcome back to episode 7 of Putting the Truth Back into True Crime. In the last 2 episodes, I've been going into the court documents and how their actions forced Bryan Kohberger to plead guilty. In this episode, I'll be discussing the alt-perp evidence, and if I have enough time, I'll go into the 911 call, the description of bushy eyebrows, and the 40-page motion to continue. Probably won't have enough time, but again, this is a series, so I'll touch on it a bit later. Thank you for tuning in. Alt-perp evidence, where do you even start? 6 months ago, I would have been in no position to make this because we had absolutely no idea what we did have or didn't have when it came to alt-perp evidence. Now that the files and stuff are released, we know exactly what we have. Let's break it down. First and foremost, the sheath. On the sheath, there was DNA found in 5 separate locations. They're numbered 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you get the gist. 1.1 was the button snap. It contained DNA from an unknown male, later found to be Bryan. Now remember guys, when we were told about this sheath and the DNA on the sheath, we were told it was single source DNA. Now that would lead you to believe that there was nothing else found on it apart from this single source of male DNA. That isn't true. Item 1.1 was DNA that was later found to be Bryan's. 1.4 was deemed to be a mixture belonging to Kaylee and Maddie. 1.2 contained DNA from 3 individuals. At least one of the contributors was male. Could have been 2, they don't know. At least 1. They couldn't compare it due to low-level results. Item 1.3 had a mix of 2 individuals. At least one of whom is male, again, could be more than 1. No comparisons could be made conveniently on that either. Item 1.5 was a 2-person mixture. Results were too low to reach a conclusion, again, conveniently. Of those items, DNA extracts remain from items 1.1 and 1.4. But we know who those belong to: Bryan, Kaylee and Maddie. However, coincidentally again, items 1.2 and 1.3 and all DNA extracts were consumed during testing. That means we will never find out who the unknown male DNA belongs to on the sheath, ever. It's gone. I'd say that the other unknown male DNA on the sheath could be pretty good proof that another male handled the knife sheath, but I'm not silly. I know someone will argue that it could belong to Bryan because it was too low to compare, which is correct, it could. But when you couple that with everything else we have, it's safe to assume that Bryan Kohberger was not the source. Then, aside from the sheath, we have item 30, which was blood on the handrail at the bottom of the stairs on the ground floor. The major profile was from an unknown male. Ethan is not the source of the major profile. There were 3 profiles in this DNA sample. Due to limited data, they can't make any conclusions about the minor profiles. Item 31.1 was a blood swab from the half wall. Ethan is the major contributor to that profile, but they're unsure who the minor profile belongs to. So we have Ethan's blood mixed with someone else's on the half wall. Items 37.1 and 37.2 are blood samples found in Jack D's apartment. They both belong to the same individual, unknown male C. Jack D and his roommates provided DNA samples, and there's no document anywhere that would suggest law enforcement asked or ever tried to find out who the blood belonged to and how it got there in the first place. Now, Jack D was on the phone to Kaylee from 2:26 to 2:43am that night, but didn't tell Kaylee's family or law enforcement. They only found it out when they searched his phone and seen it. And also Maddie told Adam 2 hours prior to them ending up dead. We're not sure what it was, but she told Adam everything. Adam also lived there too. We don't know again who this blood belongs to. Item 40 is the bloody right hand glove that was found in the driveway. Item 40.1, everything related to item 40 was on the bloody glove. Item 40.1 was blood belonging to an unknown male. It's not Ethan and not Bryan. Item 40.4 had blood from 2 individuals. The major profile belonged to the same male as item 40.1, but they couldn't identify the minor profile. There were also 2 other blood spots in the glove. Those were degraded with being out in the snow for over a week. The same as the DNA from items 29, which was the face and handprint on the kitchen window, which later tested positive for blood. Those were degraded as well because obviously they were outside, but The fact that that face print and handprint had blood on them sends shivers up my spine every single time. Maddie had DNA under her fingernails, as did other victims, obviously from the perpetrators. The lab compared the profile under Maddie's nails to most people they'd taken DNA from, no match again, but it wasn't Bryan's. Multiple people remained inconclusive. Bryan was excluded. Bryan was also excluded from every other drop of DNA in that house. On the victims, on the walls, on the glove, under their nails, on the handrail, on the half wall, on the kitchen window, on the blood in the cigarette butt behind the couch in the backyard, Bryan was excluded as the source of all of that DNA. DNA at a crime scene, guys, is evidence. It's all the evidence you're ever going to get. So what we have here is so much evidence that Bryan Kohberger was not the one that committed these crimes. That can't be denied. That can't be lied about. You can no longer tell me that there's evidence proving that Bryan Kohberger committed those crimes. One, we don't know that it was a Ka-Bar knife that even killed them. You can put multiple knives in a single sheath. Two, we don't even know that the sheath was there when left there when the killings happened. It could easily have been placed there in the 8 hours. 3, trace DNA is some of the most unreliable DNA there is. It leaves room for so many errors. So there is actually nothing to prove that the DNA was actually Bryan's, because the DNA on the sheath was destroyed during testing as well, conveniently, just like every other piece of unknown DNA that was in the house. Again, a reminder, there was unknown DNA everywhere in the house, on the victims, and none of it was Bryan's. You really need to let this sink in, guys. So, of course, Anne Taylor brought that to the judge. After reading the reports, we've learned that there are multiple suspicious individuals in or around these victims. There was the guy with the cuts in his right hand that they never took DNA from. They have the guy with the 7-inch fixed blade knives and a collection of other knives who was falling behind in his schoolwork and roaming the streets at night, who argued with Saina and Ethan and Maddie at the Mad Creek because he followed the girls and confessed to breaking into their house, saying, and I quote, "I broke into their house, and when they got home, they had no idea that I was there. I could have killed them all if I'd wanted to." Then there's Jack D, the lovely guy that no one would suspect, who had lost his first and only love, the woman he thought he would marry, who lied about being on the phone to Kaylee for 17 minutes, who lied about seeking mental health help prior to the murders, and the same guy that was more concerned about his dog after Kaylee died. That's reported in the documents. Then we have Jack S, who was reported as being annoyed with the girls at the grub truck, who they left without offering a lift even though they lived in the same street, who had blood in his own apartment, and who somehow knew there was a bag of Keystone beers in the apartment and pretended he had a bag of Keystone beers but actually never even bought the Keystone beers in the first place. Certainly not from the place that he told police he bought them anyway. Then there's Hosey Cruz, the creeper who watches girls sleeping, stabbed his ex multiple times in her upper body, whose alibi's vehicle matched the suspect vehicle, who was suspected of breaking into a house full of sorority girls with a knife, wearing a balaclava a year prior. I don't know about you guys, but I think there's an awful lot to unpack there, and I can assure you there's a lot more where those came from. They were receiving thousands upon thousands of tips. Anne Taylor took all of this to the judge, of course, the unredacted versions, and this was their response. The state asked the courts to refuse their alternate perpetrator evidence, and their reasoning was as follows. Defendant has provided no probative, admissible, significant evidence of motive, ill feelings, means, presence at the scene, or any other connection to the crime that they could possibly move the ball to the extent it supports an alternate perpetrator theory. At best, defendant's offer of proof can give rise to only wild speculation that it is possible any one of these 4 individuals could have committed the crimes. I'd like to remind anyone that 40% of femicides in the world are committed by their current partner. That number increases if we include ex-partners. In this case, we do have an ex-partner to the victim that also has the worst injuries, living within walking distance and lying about speaking to her on the phone that night. The state goes on to argue that nothing links the individuals to the homicides or otherwise gives rise to reasonable inference that they committed the crime. Indeed, it would take nothing short of rank speculation by the jury to make such findings. Their suspect also has nothing linking him to the homicides, no past connection, no proof he even knew of their existence, no motive. By their own logic, it would take nothing short of rank speculation by the jury to find Bryan guilty too. They also go on to say 3 of the individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims and interacted with the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicides. For some reason, they think that that's less of an opportunity than a man who never even knew they existed. Anyway, they say the fact that these individuals lived within walking distance to the crime scene is not probative evidence given that the perpetrator drove a vehicle to the crime scene. Further, none of these individuals drove a vehicle matching the description of the suspected killers. Now, my biggest issue with this is that they have no idea who the killer is. Up until this point, Bryan Kohberger should have been presumed innocent until proven otherwise. The fact that they're stating that the killer drove a vehicle to the scene and drove that specific vehicle when they can't prove that is an assumption. It's wild speculation. It's the exact thing the courts or the state believe the court should deny the alternate perpetrator evidence because of. I'd also like to add on that Bill Thompson stopped the testing of the DNA of the beers at the scene, the backpack left in the living room, etc. Those would have given us an idea of who was in the home that night, drinking those exact beers in the living room and in Bethany's room, and who also seems to have left in a hurry without their belongings. Any one of those individuals could have been placed exactly at that crime scene that night had Bill Thompson not stopped the testing of those items from the house at the lab only 1 week after Bryan was arrested. So he argues that there is nothing putting any of those individuals at the scene after he stopped the very tests that could tell us exactly who was in the home that night. How can you be sure that the alternative perpetrators weren't the very people sharing drinks and listening to music with Kaylee? How can you be so sure that whoever drank those beers in Bethany's room weren't the same people who chose to keep her alive? Bethany's room was the only room that contained the Keystone beers. And I've done a video on the Jack S situation. I've showed the screenshot in this video, but he didn't buy those beers that night. The police couldn't verify his car at McDonald's or his friend's car at the McDonald's or at the store that they apparently bought the beers. And Jack S never said he bought beers originally. It was when the friend said so, and then Jack S said, "Oh yeah, that's right, I did buy beers. I did borrow a bag because I dropped it off to him on the Monday before he headed out to Boise, however you say it." Now, despite all of this, the court and the judge denied the alternate perpetrator evidence. They were not allowed to bring it up at court. They could cross-examine if the state chose to put the witness on the stand, but they couldn't bring it up as a defence for Bryan, despite all of this. So there's a few things that I want you to consider that I'm going to leave you with. Is Jack S lying on behalf of someone? If he didn't actually buy the beers and borrow the bag and return it to the friend, why would they lie? What was in the bag he returned? Why didn't the police ask why? Why didn't the police ask what? How did they know that there was a backpack with Keystone beers in it in the house? Whose was it? Whose blood was in Jack D's apartment? Is it just a coincidence that him and Adam's firefighting frat bro, who was in the treehouse with Dylan that night, had cuts in his right hand but was never asked to provide DNA? Is it his blood in Jack D's apartment? Is it his footprints leading in the direction of Jack D's apartment? Did they go home with Dylan and Lakeland that night? Did they use Kaylee's phone to call Jack after one of the frat bros lost his shit? Did Kaylee and Maddie come home and ask them to leave? Did an argument break out? Did Zaina and Ethan obviously defend Kaylee and Maddie because Zaina and Maddie had known each other longer? Is that how Dylan and Bethany survived? I guess we'll never know, but I will never give up. I'm trying to find out. And on that note, I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.